Aotearoa. Welcome everyone to the first of our seminar series for today. I have to give a positive introduction because I'm Naio, I work for Rewiring, and this is my boss, Mike. So please accept nice comments here. So Mike he'll talk you through a bit of his history, but he is an electric cherry farmer and entrepreneur by nature and by his background. And he's now the CE of Rewiring Aotearoa, which has helped bring together all these community groups like Electrify the Hutt, which I'm a volunteer for. And so without further ado, he's going to talk us through some of the benefits of electrification for households and New Zealand as a whole. So over to you, Mike. We've just got a couple of people, I think.
A couple more people coming in. It's a pretty special presentation for me today. I've got a very good friend from university who's just popped in to surprise me, and then my father, who's driven all the way over. Come and watch me present as well, which is cool. He just doesn't seem to get sick of me, and most people in New Zealand are probably sick of me. Have not shut up about myself for the last 5 years, but yeah, I'll just get rolling. For those of you that don't know me, very quick 2-minute background. I did grow up here in Te Whanganui, Aotearoa, Wellington, actually in Johnsonville. And I did all my schooling. I went to Wellington College and then went to Victoria University and got a degree in computer science from there. Very quickly after that, I moved overseas to Sydney and I spent 12 years over there building technology startups. One of them, which was actually thankfully quite successful, it was a website for university students looking for their first job. In 2019, about 4 out of 5 university students in Australia used it to find their first job, and it was acquired by Sync, which was really cool. That allowed me to move back to New Zealand, and rather than moving back to Wellington, my wife and I decided we wanted to move to Central Otago, namely because we'd gone skiing every year in Central Otago and had kind of fallen in love with the ski fields and the ski lifestyle. We were looking for houses in Wanaka, Queenstown, Arrowtown, that kind of area, and what we actually found was a farm about 30 minutes south of Wanaka with 9 hectares of land on it for the same price as four-bedroom home in Wanaka. So I'm an entrepreneur who absolutely loves new opportunity. I saw the Spinoa as a new opportunity. My wife is an accountant who loves a bargain, and very quickly, the first farm I think I've ever really stood foot on in my life was a farm that I now own in Central Otago. So yeah, we founded Forest Lodge Cherry Orchard. So when we bought the land, it basically had a little bit of lucerne on it and a lot of sheep on it. The yield on the land was not particularly good, and I decided that we wanted to actually turn that around and make it a profitable primary sector business. So we planted 9,300 cherry trees in Central Otago. That's 25 kilometres worth of cherry trees. About 80 tonnes of cherries will come off our orchard every year. Most of those will get shipped away to Shanghai, Beijing and Taiwan. Those are 3 major ports that take our cherries. 80 tonnes of cherries is about 8 million cherries that go out our gates every year and onto a plane and head overseas. So I'm really proud of our operation. It has become quite commercial and quite a profitable operation, which is really good. What I can put my hand on my heart and tell you is that we do grow the best cherries in the world. But unfortunately, that is not what we've really become famous for. What we've actually become famous for is how we operate our farm. And what we do is we run our farm on 21 electric machines. So not a single drop of diesel, not a single ounce of gas gets burnt in the operation of growing of our cherries. The only time fossil fuels ever gets involved really is when we are ready to push them out to you guys and out to the market. In which case, me as a cherry farmer from Central Otago doesn't really have control over the machines that do that. But the 21 machines I do have control over, we started to make them electric. And to give you a bit of an understanding, we have orchard utility vehicles, or souped-up golf carts, right? We have a 1990 or 1989 Hilux that we converted recently to electric, and we run electric vehicles. Main Freight every year lends us an electric truck for harvest, so we can drive our fully electric cherries all the way down to the fully electric pack house, fully electrically, which is very cool. And we have New Zealand's first, the 66 electric tractor ever made in the US, and New Zealand's first that came over thanks to help from ECA with a demonstration grant, which has been really cool because it also allowed us to build what we think is the world's first electric foliage sprayer. Who here drives tractors? A couple of you, right. So you know what a PTO is? It's the drive shaft that comes out the back of a tractor. This foliage sprayer does not run off the PTO, it runs off a 32 amp caravan plug out the back of the tractor and does the same job on about 20% of the energy of the traditional sprayer. Sorry?
The spray.
Exactly, it's got its own motor that does that. And so what we're able to do now is, we've got 25 kilometres of cherry trees. It's a significant amount of energy to provide foliage spray to those cherry trees. By building that sprayer, we could run and spray our entire orchard on a single battery charge, which is super exciting. So that's a combination of not only electrification, but also energy efficiency. With the help of Beacon, we also imported New Zealand's first commercial electric frost fighting fans. I think in a couple of decades, there's always some guy that comes around and tells me about the electric fan in Bannockburn that has been around since the 1940s or something. So I'm not going to claim New Zealand's first, but definitely in the last couple of decades, the first electric frost fighting fan. These were imported all the way from South Africa, sight unseen during the middle of COVID. Quite an interesting experience figuring out how to install frost fighting fans without the experts being able to fly over to New Zealand to do it. But we did it again thanks to the help of the New Zealand taxpayer. And of course, we power all 21 of these electric machines with solar that we actually generate. We generate a lot of our energy ourselves now, which is really exciting. So one of the things that we noticed, of course, when doing this is that when you run 21 electric machines and no fossil fuels, your electricity bill goes right up. Therefore, being able to generate your own energy is a very good economic option. About 80% of the energy we use on our farm comes from energy that we create and store ourselves in our batteries. And we'll go into a bit more detail about that a bit later on down the track. The way I like to explain this to people, and especially farmers, in a very, very simple way, is that if we ran our orchard on 21 diesel machines, which is what most people do, or a bit of a combination of the two, but if it was 21 diesel machines, it would cost us about $53,000 a year in diesel costs. By running on 21 electric machines and running off New Zealand's national grid, we more than halve our energy costs straight off the bat, which is exciting. And then so what we did is this is our first solar installation that we put on our rooftop, and we nearly halved our energy bill again by doing so. But for those farmers in the room that have probably built a shed before, in fact, anyone who's built a shed before, the immediate thing you regret is you didn't build a bigger shed. The exact same thing applies to solar systems. So the next time round we went a lot bigger, and what I think we're at the point now is we've probably turned a $53,000 a year diesel bill into potentially a $40,000 revenue stream for our farm, right? So what that means is we self-consume a lot of that solar that we generate ourselves, but the other thing that we do is as most of you are well aware, the price of electricity in New Zealand is quite high at the moment. Us generating and pushing power back to the grid is very, very profitable. In the last 12 months, we generated power at about 7 cents a kilowatt hour and sold it back to the grid at about 17 cents a kilowatt hour. So to give you an understanding, even the stuff that we don't use is not going to waste anymore. It is still providing us with a really good income. That combined, I know that when electricity is in the room, one of the things that we did with our local utility company, Aurora, is we signed a deal with them, which basically means that we supply power back from our batteries back to the grid when everyone else in our neighbourhood needs it. And we are rewarded for that as well. So the exports plus the money that we get from our local lines company ultimately means that we have turned around quite a serious amount of basically improved our bottom line. To put it in perspective, in a good year in cherries, and it's never a good year in cherries, just to be aware, but in a good year we'd expect our farmers to make about $250,000 worth of profit. So a $90,000 spread is a hugely significant increase to the profits of our farm. So I've been talking about this constantly all over New Zealand, and it's resulted in about 12,000 visitors coming to our farm in the last few years. Most of those are farmers, and most of them have come to learn about electrification. There's always a guy that has his arms folded like this, looking rather grumpy when he shows up, got a bit of sustainability fatigue going on, thinking this is all just a bit woke and a bit stupid, but he's dragged along by his missus or someone else in the catchment group, and he shows up, you spot him a mile away, and I love talking to them. So the first thing I say to them is, you look like a skeptic, and this is not for me, Mrs. bought me, something like that. So what I say to them, of course, is, well, your opinion is the only one that I really actually care about right now. So we're going to take you around, we're going to show you all the machines on farm, we're going to show you all the economics, and at the end of it, you give me a rating out of 10. I'd like to know what you think. New Zealand farmers never give more than an 8 out of 10, but I've had so many 8s out of 10s. It's been quite remarkable because they realise really quickly that this has moved beyond wokeness, this has moved beyond just an argument around climate. This is not a cost anymore, this is actually a smart business decision, a smart farming decision. And from talking to a lot of people, what I've learned is it doesn't really matter who you are, what you believe in. Everybody loves driving electric tractors, right? Everybody. And, you know, we've had all sorts of politicians giggling like little schoolboys and schoolgirls driving around or hooning around on this electric tractor. And what it shows you is that electrification is something new. No one knows how to place it politically, and actually it doesn't really matter what your politics are. Everyone can get excited about it for different reasons. If you care about the climate, well, this is an absolute slam dunk. If you care about your wallet, well, this is an absolute slam dunk. And if you care about the prosperity of our nation, well, this is an absolute slam dunk. So win, win, win. Everybody wins, and we can actually stop fighting. Like, I don't really talk about emissions that much anymore. There's no need to, because emissions, like, is something that I'm big into climate advocacy, but I don't even talk about emissions anymore because it's just, as long as people are taking the steps in the right direction, it doesn't really matter what the argument is to win that. We've generated a huge amount of public interest, which has been hugely good for my ego. Constantly on the news, I'm getting recognised on the street now about being the electric cherry farmer, which is very, very exciting. And probably the biggest thing for me was being in 2023, being on Country Calendar. I know a number of you have probably seen that episode. That was probably the biggest milestone for me because it was the first time that I thought that the New Zealand primary sector actually accepted me and what I was doing. There's been a lot of people, tech entrepreneurs, that have come back from overseas and bought a farm, and it hasn't gone particularly well in the primary sector. But for me, I've changed the nuance. I'm not trying to tell people what they should be doing. All I do is show people what I've done, all right? And then I can back it up with numbers and data, and I can share as much as I can. But the number one thing is I'm not there to guilt anyone on how they farm, how they run their businesses, how they live their lives, right? That's been the problem with sustainability up to this point. All I'm here to do is show you exactly what I've done, and you'll take away, you'll cherry pick the information that's right for your business, whatever that might be. So this is where it got really, really interesting for me, because I planted 9,300 cherry trees, and then I had electrified the whole orchard. And one thing I learned very quickly from observation as well is that what a lot of farmers do is they expand beyond their capabilities, and then they get into trouble, right? Both financially and also the environment suffers. So I decided very early on, 9,300 trees was enough trees for me. I did not need to go any bigger than that. So how do you expand, or how do you keep this message going? And it happened at this time, an Australian called Dr. Saul Griffith came over to New Zealand. He came to a conference called Toru down south, and he presented to a bunch of New Zealanders on what he was doing with a concept called Rewiring Australia, and what he'd done with founding an organisation called Rewiring America. He convinced a bunch of New Zealanders to put Rewiring Aotearoa together, and I was this crazy electric cherry orchardist jumping up and down about how electrification was the future and not understanding why Wellington and other people in New Zealand just didn't understand that. And they got hold of me and invited me to become the CE of this unfunded charity, essentially. Fast forward a couple of years, this is our Rewiring Aotearoa team. We have about $6 million worth of philanthropic funding, and our whole job now is to look at is really changing New Zealand's energy system for the better. So in 2024, last year, we spent a lot of time redesigning the data and the narratives to fit New Zealand. So we wrote a number of reports, the Electric Homes Report, which was backed by ECA, the Investing in Tomorrow paper, which is the macroeconomic argument for electrification, that was co-authored by the chief economist of the Reserve Bank. There's me making an electric farms report, because farmers always miss out, so I really wanted to make sure that report was in there as well. We also went through and counted every single machine in New Zealand, which we're going to get into in a bit more detail in a moment. And then finally, we also released our policy manifesto for all the politicians to read, and they'll put whatever political narrative around these policies they want, but we wanted to deliver really clear, concise, independent policy on what is just the best thing for New Zealand moving forward. So our goal is to build the cheapest and most renewable energy system in the world, something that is totally achievable in New Zealand. And I need everyone in this room to get on board with that narrative, and everyone in New Zealand, bringing everybone in New Zealand slowly along the way. Right, we're going to do this by concentrating on the low-hanging cherries. That's the second cherry farm. How good. We counted every machine in New Zealand. There's lots of data sets all over New Zealand. We collated them all together, and where there were holes, we either estimated or went in and counted them, right? There is about 10 million fossil fuels machines in New Zealand. 700,000, which are the ones us blokes always like to talk about as a reason why we can't electrify things, are the big machines. They're generally not ready, or if there is an electric prototype somewhere in the world, they're totally uneconomic for us to do, right? So we park those to one side. We'll go into them in a minute. There's 1 million machines that are almost ready. And there's 8.5 million machines which are ready to electrify with today's technology off shelves in New Zealand right now, and in most of those cases you will save money tomorrow by electrifying, all right? So that's pretty exciting. Here are the examples of the 700,000 not ready to electrify machines. Does anyone know how many hot air balloons there are in New Zealand? Because we count them. There's 64. All right. As far as I'm concerned, we do not need to worry about electrifying hot air balloons yet. The technology just doesn't exist. Same with jumbo jets. Interestingly enough, we have a 20-ton loader sitting outside there, which is really cool to see. There are some of these machines now that are at the point where they're becoming economical. So we remove them from the not ready to the almost ready category, right? They're probably not ready for mass scale yet. They require an electrification hero. Now I see a couple of guys from Waste Management New Zealand here. How many electric rubbish trucks do you now have?
I think we're sitting on 15
Yep.
in Wellington.
In Wellington.
We have 15.
I was going to say no, you got way more than that because I saw 50 that lined up in Auckland.
But we're not talking about that side. We're talking about Wellington. So
Yeah. But it's really cool to see, right? This is Waste Management is a prime example where they have bought brand new diesel trucks and converted them to electric themselves because they've worked out the numbers over the lifetime ownership of the truck is comparatively equal or if not slightly better. And I think that's a really, really cool story. We've got things like my tractor, my electric bus funding fans. I mean, Auckland Transport has the largest electric bus fleet in the Southern Hemisphere. New Zealand, I just can't believe it. I grew up in Johnsonville, now there's a double-decker electric bus that drives by my mum's house. It used to be a van when I was a teenager. That's how far things have come. Utes are an interesting one. We've all seen a couple of utes now, the BYD Shark. There will be an electric ute, a full electric four-wheel drive ute coming out in New Zealand this year, which is very exciting. So we're probably at the point where we remove the utes from the 1 million almost ready category into the 8.5 million machines that are ready to electrify.
Are you keeping it live as like an electric ute comes out?
Every year we'll probably update it, yeah. I get to change my slides a lot faster than the actual follow-up report that we did. And so I want to talk to you quickly about New Zealand's emissions because I think this is a really important thing to understand. I think about emissions as a byproduct of electrifying everything like that. We will reduce our emissions massively, but the New Zealand emission story is really different because when you look at it, it makes our farmers look like climate criminals, right? Pretty much half of all New Zealand's emissions are agricultural emissions. I don't like the way that we do this because it tells us what our emissions are, but it does not tell us why we create these emissions, right? And so in Rewiring Aotearoa, we haven't added to these emissions or subtracted from them. We just simply want to remap them to tell a better story for our nation. And when you do that, you can split your emissions into two key categories, our domestic emissions and our export emissions. Now, both of these emissions are on our books and we have to figure out how to deal with them. But our export emissions are the way that our country makes a lot of its money. And it's very, very difficult for us to talk about for all those reasons. Climate action appears to be a cost. Our domestic emissions are a little bit different, right? Those are the emissions that underpin our average lifestyles here in New Zealand, right? They are largely the machines in our lives, a little bit of waste and a little bit of agriculture, right? So it sort of shows you a bit of a difference in the way that we want to talk about this. Rewiring Aotearoa is not a complete climate solution. Electrification is not a complete climate solution, but it's a damn good start. And so if we take these emissions and have a look at them further, and we expand on them, this is the really interesting thing, right? 25% of New Zealand's gross emissions come from fossil fuel machines where it is economical and the technology exists to replace them today, right? So if we were serious about climate, this is 100% the way that we should go because it's just the easy first step in the right direction. It also buys us a lot more time to figure out the harder to mitigate emissions. And let's talk about New Zealand's energy system quickly, right? We pat ourselves on the back by how renewable our electricity system is. We're really proud of it. But if you look at our energy system as a whole, we're not really that renewable at all, right? 73% is fossil fuels. The large majority of that is fossil fuels that are sourced from overseas. And from a patriotic argument perspective, the thing that we're putting out there is, do we really want to run on Saudi Arabian molecules or do we want to run on New Zealand homegrown electrons? Right? And this is something that you're able to win Uncle Barry over at the family barbecue with that kind of argument.
So that's
right?
what is that, emissions or production?
This is just fuel use. This is fossil fuel use, yeah. So, or energy use, sorry. And it's really, really expensive, right? New Zealanders collectively, you and me, we spend $55 million a day on fossil fuels across our homes, our vehicles, our businesses, our farms, and our industry, right? $55 million a day, most of that which is imported from overseas. This is refined fuels mainly, diesel and petrol, as well as coal, and maybe liquefied natural gas now is going to put that price up even further. But it gives you an idea of just how much money that is, right? I dropped the slide. Okay, I have dropped one slide. The households alone right, in New Zealand, if we electrify the cars that live in those households, as well as the way that we heat our water, heat our rooms, cook our food, if we put solar panels on the roofs and batteries in the garages, we think that we will save New Zealand households about $29 million a day, right? And on really aggressive, but totally quite realistic adoption curves of everyone in New Zealand got behind this narrative, we think by 2040 that is about $100 billion worth of cumulative savings, right? Now that's such a large number, no one knows how to contextualize that at all. So with the help of Nio, my teammate, who lives here in the Hutt, we put together some infrastructure examples of just how much money that is, right? That is 1,200 mailing interchanges. We could fix Wellington's water woes 250 times over with the household savings from electrifying all the houses in New Zealand. It's thousands and thousands of cycleways, right? It just sort of shows you how hamstrung we are by the way that we do things at the moment, the energy that we rely on. And household energy bills keep rising. And this is something that's really important to understand. This is exactly what the cost per kilowatt hour is of electricity coming into your home. If you don't know what a kilowatt hour is, it's a unit of measurement, just like a litre of fuel. You'll probably know that you're probably paying somewhere like 35 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour for delivered energy to your home at the moment. Those are those two lines. We've got two lines that we need to talk about. One is grid electricity in total, which includes your fixed charges from Wellington Electricity, and you've also got your excluded fixed costs, or your volumetric costs, which is how much it costs to get a kilowatt hour of power to your home. Now, it's really interesting times for the customer in New Zealand at the moment when you compare it to the cost per kilowatt hour of this, right? If you finance solar on your rooftop at 5.5%, that's just a standard interest rate. You might be able to get that a lot better if you can get a 0 or 1% loan from the bank. You're looking at about 13 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour you generate on your rooftop, right? That green line is even more interesting because that is the line of a 9 kilowatt system. If you generate when you generate on your rooftop, half of it gets used immediately in your fridge, in your freezer, in your hot water system, whatever else it might be, and half of it gets stored in a battery for later. And this is a really interesting time in the New Zealand energy system at the moment because this is what is beginning to happen. The cost of electricity delivered by the grid continues to rise, and the cost of technology available to the customer continues to fall. I was really excited about Wellington Electricity yesterday, talking about the fact that we need to look at how it is that our utility companies and our customers can start working better together, because if we do this, we will actually smooth out that purple line. One of the biggest things, the biggest fear that I have at the moment is that wealthy people are nearly at the point where they can make the decision to leave the grid. And if that happens, well then it's the non-wealthy people of New Zealand that have to pay for all that infrastructure. So that's a big thing that I'm quite concerned about. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but I'm already seeing examples in wealthy rural New Zealand of this happening. Put some solar in, put some batteries in, and a diesel generator for the last sort of 5 days in a year where you're not generating and storing enough. And that seems to be happening a little bit at the moment. Another way of looking at that is if you electrify your home, we need to upgrade this graph because it's 2025 now, but if you electrified your home last year, this is the sort of electric savings that we're looking like from doing so. So when you add up all the capital costs, all the interest costs, all the energy costs, the road user charges, when you move to an electric vehicle, that is now the savings. And the savings continues to go up and up and up, which is incredibly interesting. One of the other things I'd like to talk about is how energy is money. Right, and when you run a fossil fuel home, which is petrol, gas or LPG, you're using about 90 kilowatt hours worth of energy a day, about a third of that in a fully electric home. So not only are we talking about the cost per unit of energy being cheaper, we're also talking about the efficiency of these machines being way better as well. And I like to talk about the whole energy bill for the customer in our homes in New Zealand, right? A lot of the time previously when we're talking about things like energy efficiency around insulation, we're talking purely about space heating. And we have had problems with homes in New Zealand not being particularly good quality. We like to think that we're moving to a better scenario there, and we need to start looking at all the other energy opportunities for households. And you can see right there, if you're driving around in a petrol car in New Zealand at the moment, about 60% of the energy that you spend will be on that car. If you live in rural New Zealand, that is even higher, right? The typical driver drives 11,000 kilometres in a year. Rural New Zealand, it's more like 30,000 kilometres a year, right? So I have a lot of farmers come to my farm that tell me electric vehicles are great for city folk, but they're not great for people in the country. And I just turn around and say, well, how many Ks do you drive on the road compared to off-road? It's always about 95%. It's actually complete opposite economically is true. So a fully electric home, as I mentioned, is water heating, space heating, cooking, driving, and the two new appliances that are coming to every home in New Zealand, which is solar and batteries. And when I say every home, I say that quite liberally. We think in Aotearoa about 80% of homes are suited to our economic to put rooftop solar on. So there's ceramic tiles, there's different orientations, there's lots of trees around properties and things that can often make it not economic, but we think about 80% of the homes it is economic to put solar on. Batteries is a really interesting scenario that is coming because we are starting to see with the price of power rising so much that they are starting to become really economical. A point that I'd like to make is that when you finance batteries on your mortgage at 5.5%, it's about 27 cents a kilowatt hour. So that gives you a kind of an understanding. Batteries are starting to become economical for a lot of households, especially if you have teenagers that use a lot of showers, or have a lot of showers. So let's talk about water heating first of all, because this one's really interesting. So what we did with our electric homes report in partnership with Hutt is have a look at the total lifetime ownership cost of the different ways that we can heat water in this country. And what it shows you is there's a stark difference. Now, where I am in the South Island, where we do not have a reticulated gas network, it's about $16,000 over the lifetime. So if you make a decision to buy a gas hot water system that runs off LPG in the South Island of New Zealand, you're committing to $16,000 roughly over the next 15 years. Right? If you compare that to a heat pump and a heat pump with solar, you can see that there's dramatic difference in the overall lifetime cost of this one appliance. We're looking, what are we looking at there? Like $4,000 if you're on the gas network here in Wellington, right? Spatial heating is different. For some reason in Wellington, a lot of people heat their homes with gas. It's quite surprising. And when you see that there, you can see that there is a remarkable cost savings opportunity. And so what we say to people in households is, well, the next time your electric heating breaks or your gas heating breaks, we want you to explore the electric option. So we're not trying to rush people into this process. People are along the way. The last thing I want to be saying to you is you need to be doing this for climate. What I want to be saying to you is this is a smart economic decision. And sometimes, in the case of the LPG in the South Island of New Zealand, even if you installed an LPG gas hot water system yesterday, you're better ripping it out today and financing a new hot water heat pump. That is what we're looking like in terms of energy costs in this country, which is quite remarkable. And cooking is a little bit different. We don't use a lot of energy for cooking, so really the capital cost of the induction stove versus the gas cooktop is pretty much the lifetime cost. There's a little bit of energy, but it's not massive. But one of the things that ECA just released very recently is just on the really bad problems that we have with gas cooking in homes in New Zealand. Russ, how many premature deaths are there a year from gas cooking?
It's about the same as the road top.
About 200?
Yeah.
200, and then how many childhood asthma cases every year was it?
Too many.
Too many, yeah, thousands. And so it gives you an understanding of just what that is. And something like we've got rid of asbestos, we've got rid of lead from paint. We probably now need to look at getting gas out of kitchens, right? Just from how the health costs to New Zealanders. And then we look at driving. Now, driving's been a really interesting one because this government's put a lot of work into making electric vehicles as uneconomical as they possibly can, but they still haven't really managed to win because of this reason, right? Petrol prices continue to rise at quite alarming rates. If you look at the cost per kilowatt hour of usable energy, that's what the petrol line looks like compared to grid. Compared to running an EV off the grid, compared to running an EV off solar that you've installed on your home. And that's what that looks like as actual numbers. So a total lifetime cost of a typical petrol car in New Zealand, where you include all of the energy costs, is about $100,000 a year. If you are running an electric vehicle, even when you include RUCs, it's about $20,000 less, especially if you're able to run that off solar on your own rooftop. The big thing here for those that are climate conscious, look at those emissions. Isn't that mental, right? So you can save money and save emissions all at the same time. I don't know about you guys, there's been a number of people that drive electric vehicles, a number of people that don't. Again, we do not go down the path of guilting anyone into doing this. What we do is we take them for a joyride in our electric vehicle and it converts people immediately, right? Has anyone ever seen that Australian coal farmers driving Tesla's YouTube page? It is absolutely mental. Yeah, it is so funny to see these guys floor it in a Tesla. And grins with no teeth and all sorts of things. It's awesome. And so, yeah, you can see sort of the difference in cost between a new petrol car and a new electric car when you have that over its lifetime. So really, really quite significant savings. And then, of course, we have solar. Now, I like to quote myself. I think this was Dave, my colleague's slide that he uses in his presentations, but I really like it, and it is my quote. So yeah, rooftop solar is the cheapest form of electricity available to New Zealand households. That's the biggest conviction that I have around that. One of the biggest convictions I have, sorry. The thing is, it's not necessarily accessible to everybody, right? There's a $20,000 cost probably to put it on your roof. Now, those of you that are in the room that have space on your mortgage or a spare $20,000 lying around, fill your boots. We have a massive equity issue that we have to solve in this country is the people that are going to benefit the most from rooftop solar cannot yet afford rooftop solar. And so that's something that we're working on massively at the moment, which I can talk about at the moment soon. But if you look at 35 cents a kilowatt hour, the average price that you're paying for electricity, about half of that is generation on the wholesale market, and the other half is all the poles and wires that Wellington Electricity and Transpower essentially use to get that or deliver it to your home. It's really sort of quite important to understand that. Recently, our power bills have gone up because the price of maintaining those poles and wires has also gone up. And we need to be doing everything we can to work with our utility companies to obviously build out the cheapest system for New Zealanders. And this is roughly how it looks. 19 cents a kilowatt hour for generation at all our large generation, all our large power plants around New Zealand. 3 cents when we add Transpower's transmission up and down the country. About 13 cents for distribution. About 5 cents for retail and other things because everybody in the energy system loves to clip the ticket on your bill on the way through to your bill. And you're working at about 30 cents a kilowatt hour for volumetric and about $2.50 a day for the typical New Zealander, right? What is really interesting, of course, when you finance rooftop solar on your roof, it gets delivered, there's no one in between a panel and your fridge. And it's 13 cents a kilowatt hour, right? Or it's about, if you're not financing it and you pay for it in cash, it's about 6 cents a kilowatt hour to give you an idea. So the way that I like to say this is even if aliens came to planet Earth and took over all of the gentailers and made power free, because they could do that because they're aliens, it still would not get to the households of New Zealand cheaper than finance rooftop solar, right? And that's the interesting dynamic that we have. Now, a lot of people, I want to make a caveat here that I am very, very pro-grid. A lot of people sometimes when I say this think that I don't think that the future is in the electricity grid. 13 cents a kilowatt hour, of course the sun is not up 24 hours a day, right? So we still need power to run our lives. What this is about is bringing your average cost of electricity down significantly for your farming. Right, and then we get into all of these sorts of questions. So, where are we going to get all this electricity from? We're going to electrify 10 million machines, aren't we, team? How much more electricity is that going to require? Well, the answer is about 2 times as much electricity as New Zealand currently produces. And so where is that electricity going to come from is something that every second Facebook comment that I get is about this. Where is this electricity going to come from? The short answer is the Australians think that they will have 80% rooftop solar penetration by 2050. And I see no reason why New Zealanders shouldn't be the same because the economics, Australians have slightly better solar economics, but it's a couple of cents, right? And so if we're looking at it from this perspective, 80% of homes will produce 40% more electricity for New Zealand's electricity system, right? They'll save a lot of money by doing it too. And if the farmers did it, all the farmers in New Zealand did exactly what I've done, exactly what Vern's done, and any other farmers in the room with solar? No? Just you, Vern? Hero, I love it. They would generate about 60% more renewable electricity from New Zealand's electricity system. So just the farmers and the households alone could go a long way to doubling renewable electricity on our grid, right?
Sorry, what do you mean by a long way? 40% plus 60% is 100%.
Oh, well, that's assuming all of the farmers do it, right? So that's what 100% penetration. Let's say we get to 50%. It's still
That's the whole farm, or just
so that's based on 180 kilowatts worth of solar on a farm. Yeah. So it's not massive, and you can see that some of the farmers go way bigger than that. Yeah, exactly right. So then the second question we have come up by the farmers is, but the grid can't handle it. Who's heard that one before? Who's heard that one before? The grid can't handle it. Yeah, it happens all the time. And one of the things that I would like to talk about here is just, and it was alluded to last night as well, is power lines are kind of like highways. 90% of the time you have a clear run into town. 10% of the time the highway is congested. And what do? We build bigger highways to cover that 10% of the time, right? It's exactly the same with our power system. And we would say that I've said 38%, I've now been corrected to about 40%. So our poles and wires in New Zealand are utilised to an average of 40%, right? which means conceivably, we could squeeze twice as much electricity into the same poles and wires, right? There's all this nuance to that because some poles are going to need to be upgraded, poles and wires are going to need to be upgraded sooner than others, but you get the rough idea. We have to be smarter about this. So I drew this on a napkin. This is not scientific at all, it's just there to illustrate a point, right? What happens in winter is that we want to use power in the mornings and the evenings. That's when things get really congested, when we're trying to heat our homes, have showers, boil the jug, cook our food, that kind of thing, right? And what that does is those peaks mean that we have to keep upgrading those wires to handle the poles and wires that handle those peaks. What we need to do is be smart about it and figure out how to smooth out that load. And that comes from smart EV charging, that comes from a good tariff system that encourages the right behavior from customers. It comes from encouraging batteries in homes, right? And this is what I'd like to talk about, is the one thing I firmly believe in from my own personal experience, is a battery in a home removes that home from peak periods, right? So the more homes that we can get to put batteries in, the less congestion there will be on the poles and wires, the cheaper the energy system becomes for everyone. That's a really sort of important point to understand. So if you can remove a home entirely from peak, if you can take the load off the network and instead put that load onto a battery, that's really exciting. What is even more exciting is what bigger entities can do. My farm now exports power and powers 25 homes during those congestion periods. And I've recently signed a deal with my local utility company. I'm sure you've got contracts downstairs for people to start signing, to actually be paid, to actually be rewarded for servicing the grid during those congestion periods. And I think that's a really exciting pathway forward of EDBs and customers starting to work together. We have a really, really rich history in New Zealand. I'm going to finish on a high here, because I think one of the things that I like to, there's a Te Ao Māori perspective of always walk backwards into the future looking at the past, like looking at what our ancestors have done. And we have some really fucking cool electrical innovation in this country that everyone has forgotten, right? Here's a couple of examples. The world's first fully electric home. Over 100 years old, defined as fully electric because it's heated with electric resistant hot water heating, electric spatial heating, right? Didn't have a chimney. Why? Because hydroelectricity in this country was a lot cheaper than kerosene, right? Hydroelectricity in this country ended up being a lot cheaper than wood. And so this is a really exciting thing. Now, I've heard two stories. I've heard one that it was in Tauranga and one that it was in Havelock North. Does anyone know the actual answer to this? Don't know where it was. I believe it was in Tauranga, but I have been corrected at the last community event. I actually haven't looked up to see where it is yet. But a very interesting piece of data, and that's the first in the world. Does anyone know where this is? Reefton. Beaten by what city? First electric public streetlights in the world were in what city? Paris. Sorry, so Reefton, when you think about it, is the Paris of New Zealand. We had the Southern Hemisphere's first transmission line, right? It's over in the Bulledean district near Queenstown. Essentially gold miners figuring out how to run energy from one water-rich gully over to the gold-rich gully on the other side. And this is a really, if you're an energy nerd like I am, you can get a helicopter charter flight to go and see this thing. It is insane, like it is so steep. That train, the photo doesn't do it much justice and doesn't really show up here, but these are all the power poles, and it's absolutely insane how treacherous the land was that these gold miners, well over 100 years ago, installed this transmission line. A lot of people talk about how it is, that everyone gets confused about how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids, and I think this is the real question. How did New Zealand gold miners build this transmission line, right? We have the world's first fully electric chariot here. And we actually have a lot more on the way in the primary sector as well. I think Vern's well on the way to becoming a world's first electric milk, is that right?
Well, we're planning to put about 340 kilowatts.
Good. And then we just need a 160 horsepower electric tractor, don't we? And then you'll be away laughing. Good news is there's one in France now, so they're on their way, right? I've been working with vineyards around electric wine. We've been working with Zespri around electric kiwi fruit. Found out not that long ago we actually now do have electric chickens in this country. Tiro and the Waikato, so a fully electric cherry farm, fully electric chicken farm, which I think is absolutely cool. And we also now have an electric mushroom farm here in New Zealand. So these things are coming. And they're coming fast. And one of the things I'm very proud to be part of the primary sector is so much of this innovation is happening in the primary sector. Why? Because farmers hate costs. They hate costs more than anything else, and this is a really good way of lowering those costs. But this is where it all begins, right? Is we now have 31 community groups around the country that are dedicated to helping their neighbours electrify. We've had Electrify the Wairarapa. We've got 3 people, including my father, who have come over from the Wairarapa, who put on an event last year, which seeded this event here in the Hutt, right? We had Electrify Queenstown last year, this year, which was also a massive event. The number one reason in Australia that people put solar on their roofs, do you know what it is?
Because the next door neighbour did.
Because the next door neighbour did, right? Who knows someone with solar on their roofs? Aren't they the most annoying people? They just play at it, and they will not shut up about it until you install solar on your roof and you can give it back to them. So what we're really keen at Rewiring Aotearoa is to support as many of these community groups to get functions like this happening, to get it like this happening and get it off the ground. Some community events are just starting out now. Some like this are a lot more mature, and it's really exciting to see where this goes. I want everyone in this room to make sure that you go home and electrify your dad like I did, electrify your mum like I did, and would you believe it? I just electrified my in-laws. How good is that? So yeah, the just sharing the knowledge is all that we need to do, and the rest of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so with that, I will open the floor. Any questions that you have, no matter how difficult they are, no matter how obtuse, how rude they are, fire away, and if I can't answer them, I'll let you know, and I might get back to you, I might not. Hi.
You mentioned the problem of, I'll call it electrification justice.
Yep.
What thoughts have you about the problems of upfront costs?
Yep. So do we have any local government candidates in the room? Hello, how are you? The big thing that we're working on at Rewiring Aotearoa is called the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme. I think this is a really big opportunity for New Zealand that as many local government people have to get behind as possible. Essentially what it is from a customer's perspective is low interest, long-term finance. So one of the big things about all these numbers that I've shown you is they're all financed at 5.5% over 15 years. You cannot get a loan from a bank for 15 years, right? So that is the big problem that we have at the moment. Talking to the banks, we don't think they're going to do this. And so what we need is a new finance mechanism that will allow people to finance over 15 years. Essentially the way it works is it's lent out kind of through the rates bill, probably as a separate bill through councils. The money is raised by a bond by the local government funding authority. Essentially allows you to do the electrification upgrades in your home, put solar on the roof. Doesn't apply to the car yet, but my goal is one day that once we've got this over the line, it potentially would apply to the car as well. And essentially that allows everyone from pensioners, all sorts of, any homeowner essentially can put this finance on their property. The second other part that we're working on at the moment, and we're in the process of hopefully raising some money for this, is a solar for renters program. And that's how we solve that problem. Landlords and renters do not trust each other at the moment. There needs to be some sort of trusted intermediary body in the middle there that allows for these sorts of transactions to happen. But in theory, the landlord can make good money and good yield off the solar system, and they can halve renter tenants' power bills all at the same time. So this hasn't been solved anywhere in the world as far as I know. In Australia, you've got 40% rooftop solar penetration and under 5% rooftop solar penetration on rental properties. So there's still a long way to go in that space. Hi.
Hi, is there an app that would tell you within your house how much potential for solar?
Yes, there is. And so does ECA have one of these yet? Like, do you have like a solar yield thing for homes?
Yep.
This is Russ from ECA, everyone. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a good tool. I think we need to catch up with batteries and the impact batteries can make, but absolutely visit ECA or Genless and you can give a real good understanding of your house. I think there's a million machinations in the back end that will give you a pretty good indication. Still some variables with trees growing things, but for the most part, it's more than enough to give you a good indication if solar's going to be right. And to Mike's point, with 8 out of 10 homes actually really working well with solar.
Even Fern Hill, the shadiest suburb in Queenstown, the economic stacks up for rooftop solar, which is quite incredible. That's only because the prices come down. When I talk about 13 cents a kilowatt hour, that is average solar yield in New Zealand when you install at $2,000 a kilowatt on your rooftop. So some people, if they have really, really, really good solar yield, which probably isn't the Hutt, let's be honest, they might get down to 11 cents or something like that. Some people who live in Fernhill, it might be more like 17, 18 cents a kilowatt hour. Gives you a kind of an idea. The general standard now is $2,000 a kilowatt installed on your roof and $1,000 a kilowatt hour for battery. So that's what we do all those calculations on. The good news is we're seeing a lot of quotes now at $1,800 a kilowatt. So they continue to come down in price, which is really exciting as well.
Because that was my next question, because the Hutt, the hours of sunlight.
I mean, it will vary, but I think like one of the things is you always notice the bad days. Right?
It's rubbish, eh? The solar just, so what's the top?
It's like 10%, right? Yeah, 5% for you. Yeah, it's 10% where we are in central target. But like, yeah, but the point is, you always notice when the clouds are out, because we all go, oh, the weather's terrible. Most of the time, we don't talk about the weather, because it's an okay clear day. And so what you'll find is you'll generate obviously a lot more in summer than you will in winter. You'll generate a lot more when the sun is out, rather when it's cloudy. But if you look at it over an overall aggregate, your price of power plummets with solar. Yeah.
I live in the Hutt.
Yes.
My power bill is not 25%.
So 75% reduction in your power. You've got a battery? No battery. Battery as well. Yeah. So you work this all out pretty quickly, and we've got a calculator online as well. The other thing is, like, if you don't want to do it yourself, or it's a bit too much heavy information, is you get a solar installer to come and give you a quote. $2,000 a kilowatt, that's how you know if you're doing right, and they'll do all the numbers and calculations for you to estimate the yield. Hi.
I was also just going to say that as part of Electrify the Hutt, there's quite a few people in the group who have already got Hutt, and they live in this area. So when you talk to them, you're getting real life experience from people who have already done it and have seen the numbers. So
sounds like these two gentlemen right here are the ones to talk to.
Yeah.
So,
Hey.
for a farmer who's considering solar and primarily for export, do you need to be close to grid infrastructure?
So it depends on how big you want to go.
Yeah.
For me, I get really nervous about utility scale solar farms because it has a social license backlash for rural communities in particular, because you're transforming landscapes, right? What I say to farmers usually is I'm about solar, like farmers with solar, not solar farms. And when I say farmers with solar, it's really using your existing grid connections and maximizing that grid connection to push out. A lot of farmers, especially dairy farmers, have huge grid connections for irrigation. So that's sort of what I play it. I also think that the days for utility scale solar, we've seen what has happened in Australia with the price duck curve, and nobody is investing in utility scale solar without storage, right? And so the same thing will probably happen in New Zealand. The way I like to
So then you still need to be close to a substation or something?
I mean, my farm is well away from the substation. Yeah. I use 130 kVA connection to generate that kind of revenue. That revenue won't be around forever, but right now it's really good. Yeah. Down the back.
Mike, just as a matter of interest, speaking of the weather, my system in Katoni is currently generating nearly 2 kilowatts per hour.
On a 9 kilowatt system?
At the present time, which is about 1/3 of what our house is using at the moment.
Gives you a good idea? Yep.
I had 20 days last year where I needed the grid.
Yep. And that's what we're seeing a lot of it. 20 days is about what you need the grid for. The grid becomes an awesome insurance policy, right? And we want everyone to stay on the grid, because if they don't stay on the grid, then we get into all sorts of social equity concerns. Hi.
Hi. From a battery and solar perspective,
Yes.
have you factored in the end of life and recycling costs that come
That is a really good question, because I just met your CEO the other day.
I know, that's right.
The short answer is no, we haven't included the cost of recycling or disposal of any of that thing. We've done 100% depreciation over 25 years on solar and 15 years on batteries, because that seems to be what the limits are. But by the time my batteries are ready to be retired, you will have figured out how to make recycling profitable for both of us, right?
Hopefully, yeah, for both of us.
A lot of people get caught up in the recycling stuff, and I just want to, and there'll be people in the room that are generally concerned about this stuff, and I think rightly so. We just have to remember to contextualize everything. And so at the moment, waste is an unwanted byproduct of a process. The biggest waste that we have in this country is CO2. The thing is, we cannot see it. We spread it evenly throughout the atmosphere and create an existential crisis. But if you look at it on a mass perspective, CO2 is by far the biggest problem. So when you look at something like a car, it will use about its weight in materials every 18 months, and it will generate twice its weight in waste every 18 months. So that's kind of what you're looking at with a petrol car. When you go electric, it's 400 kilos of additional material. So that kind of puts that all in perspective. We import about 3.1 million tonnes of fossil fuels into the country every year to run our cars. If I had to click my fingers overnight and convert all those cars to electric, I need about 800,000 tonnes of batteries in total. So 3.1 million a year or 800,000 in total, right? That's what we're dealing with. So it's about 2% of the materials consumption. So from a waste perspective, I mean, I've learned so much from Phoenix Recycling about the problems that we have with recycling batteries at the moment. I mean, how are you going to get a insurance policy on a ship taking secondhand lithium iron phosphate batteries out of New Zealand and going somewhere else? And we do not have a strong enough manufacturing sector to take all that recycled feedstock. So that's the kind of situation that we're dealing with at the moment. What's it called? Black mass or something is the thing that you guys create?
Yeah.
But
And insurance-wise, we've gone offshore.
Yeah.
So there's no one in New Zealand that
will do it. Yeah, and so black mass is exciting, but it costs more to make it than what you get as a commodity product at the moment. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. And you take 98%, or you can recover 98% materials from solar panels, so that's good as well.
So it's a really good recovery rate. But just to do a plug here, Hutt City Council has just set up for smaller than 5 kilo batteries recycling. So there's 3 locations now and there.
So you can do e-bike batteries now?
No, don't be plugging that. Those are the most volatile ones, unfortunately. But your household batteries, you can take them into the Hutt.
Generally, what we're talking about now is 15-year lifetimes on household batteries and 25-year lifetimes on solar panels. So I look at this as like, you know, do we really argue about the waste that you create from a really high quality backpack that you wear over single-use plastic bags? That's kind of the same argument that we're looking at here. Yeah. Hi.
The other thing you can add into though is the more demand for batteries, it's changing. The technology is changing rapidly, and we're moving into things like sodium batteries. Going to be cheaper, a lot safer.
Correct.
Yeah. So,
and the other thing is that being a technology nerd like me, maybe yourself, the other problem that I have is there's always a shiny new battery that does new stuff just down the road. So we've upgraded our battery. You know, I was like, oh, these batteries are going to last for 15 years, and within 3 years I upgraded them. But my claim to fame is that my old battery is now at Richie McCaw's house. So they do have value and you can sell them.
As you have expanded, have you kept the same technology?
No. So main reason we didn't is we went from a 48 volt system to a 300 volt system just because I needed that much power for my farm. Yep. Hello, future mayor hopeful of Hutt City.
Stuff like I love it.
Yeah.
Have you done much work around the economics of all that money that leaves New Zealand to import all that fuel versus keeping it locally? Study economic?
Yeah, so the Investing in Tomorrow report that we did with the Chief Economist of the Reserve Bank has all that in there. That's where I get the $55 million a day figure from that we spend on fossil fuels, and the $29 million figure that we'll save if we electrify homes and put solar on the roof of those homes and batteries in those homes. So yeah, all of that is there. I'll get out of my depth really quickly on some of the economic arguments, but one of the things about New Zealand that we struggle with is a balanced current account. You know, we have a really big current account deficit. So much of that is due to energy imports. And so generating locally, it might not entirely fix the current account, but it's a big step in the right direction. And I think the patriotic narrative that we can push there is really powerful and really strong. Yeah.
Your policy document, which I've read, it's really good, but it seems to me that it's 1 step forward and 3 steps back.
Oh, tell me more.
Because of the LNG terminal, for instance, and things like that. So what are you doing in terms of pushing that document?
God, me and Nye are in Wellington constantly at the moment. So, hey, actually, really exciting news. We managed to convince Chris Hipkins to put solar on his roof. We're going to go around and film that tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting. Shane Jones, not yet, but we have. You may have noticed Shane Jones is talking more about geothermal and less about coal, which I like to claim is something that we've done as well. The short answer is there's a wide spectrum. There's ideological stuff which is really difficult to deal with, and I honestly think that's probably where that LNG terminal idea has come from. But what I've noticed with politicians is across the House there is a selection of them that really understand this and get this. Do you know what they all have in common? They've all got solar on the roofs. And so as soon as because I think like one of the things that we talk about is energy literacy, and people think they're energy literate, but they're not. And it's not until you're actually generating energy yourself and you understand the value of energy that you start to realize that the way that we do things isn't particularly smart. And when you think about it, every New Zealander is paying money to an energy landlord. We always talk about wanting to buy our own home to not pay landlords, it's the landlord's profit margins. The exact same thing should apply to energy. You own your own as much of your energy as you can, and that will change the game. So, but I know I've got a really good relationship with the current energy minister. We've got a really good relationship with the previous energy minister and the one before that, Megan Woods. The whole idea is really to socialise this as much as possible. But the one big thing in all of this is politicians are generally, by definition, quite cowardly until enough people start talking about it and they realise it's an election winner, and then they'll go after it. So one of the big things that we are trying to do is bring these community movements up to make them brave enough to do the right thing. Yeah. So it is a long process. I know the beehive like the back of my hands now, and I think I've met with probably 60-70% of MPs in Parliament to talk about this stuff. We've been to caucus meetings with every single political party now. And different political parties are catching on and some are not. The announcement, I think, about some of the stuff in the energy system last week was a little bit disappointing, but there is all sorts of dynamics at play when that happens. So we just keep pushing forward and going hard, and if we have 100% solar penetration in this room by the end of next year, by the end of this year, that's going to be way more powerful when it comes to, talking to your local MP about whether or not solar is the future for New Zealand. Yeah. Hello again.
I've seen some information about domestic scale wind generation.
Yep.
Is that a promising or a realistic thing?
Possibly. So the way that I would explain this is I have not seen wind on a per kilowatt hour price be cheaper than solar and batteries. So if you're looking at solar at 13 cents a kilowatt hour finance on your mortgage and batteries at 28 cents, I haven't seen wind go cheaper than that for domestic scale, right? At scale, and we're talking wind farm scale, it's incredibly cheap energy thing, but you've got to put a post 50 metres in the air or whatever it might be. So, but what I like to do is if you can show me now, as soon as the per kilowatt hour price is down, then of course we'll be promoting it big time, but I just haven't seen it yet.
Were you comparing it to solar?
Solar and batteries.
Right, but if in places where solar was not feasible, because of the location,
yep.
Would wind be a viable option?
Could be, depends if you can get it cheaper than the price of the grid. As economically, that is. Maybe, haven't seen it yet, unless you're doing serious scale. And if you're doing serious scale, it's probably a utility play rather than a behind the meter play. But yeah, I mean, we're open to anything that saves customers money. Essentially, I just haven't seen the evidence. When it's the same with farmers who talk about micro hydro. Like for over 100 years, it might be cheaper than solar and batteries are today, but over say 20 years, which is what most people are kind of looking at, it's not cheaper. So just because of all the civil works that has to be done with things like that.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
It's always wonderful and energising to hear you speak. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the first session. We've got Greg Skelton, who is the Chief Executive of Wellington Electricity. You've already heard Mike talk about the importance of the grid and enabling this all to happen. And so next we're going to hear from Greg about the role that grid players like themselves play in helping all of this happen. And they're also our biggest sponsor of this event, and so we're really grateful for them. But for now,